not yet begun to touch on the abortion debate today. Let's continue with the wise words of one George Carlin.
Here's another question I have. How come when it's us, it's an abortion, and when it's a chicken, it's an omelet? Are we so much better than chickens all of a sudden? When did this happen, that we passed chickens in goodness? Name 6 ways we're better than chickens. See, nobody can do it. You know why? Because chickens are decent people. See,
chickens are decent people. That's great. By the way, in Alabama, they're now calling eggs chickens. So let's get back to Carlin.
Chickens hanging around in drug gangs, do you? You don't see a chicken strapping some guy to a chair and hooking up his nuts to a car battery, do you? When's the last chicken you heard about came home from work and beat the shit out of his hand? Huh? Doesn't happen, because chickens are decent people. But let's get back to this abortion shit. Now, is a fetus a human being? This seems to be the central question. Well, if a fetus is a human being, how come the census doesn't count them? If a fetus is a human being, how come when there's a miscarriage they don't have a funeral? If a fetus is a human being, how come people say we have 2 children and 1 on the way instead of saying we have 3 children?
Let me stop it there. He mentioned the lack of a funeral for a fetus that's been miscarried. Didn't they just have a ruling about, I believe it's Indiana's abortion laws, that they now have codified into law that if you have an aborted fetus that it needs to be given a proper burial?
Something to that effect.
Yeah.
Yeah, George would roll over in his grave.
Unbelievable. I mean, this is nuttery, folks. Absolute nuttery. Let's continue with Carlin.
People say life begins at conception. I say life began about 1 billion years ago, and it's a continuous process. Continuous, just keeps rolling along. Rolling along. I say, you know something? Listen, you can go back further than that. What about the carbon atoms? Huh? Human life could not exist without carbon. So is it just possible that maybe we shouldn't be burning all this coal? Just looking for a little consistency here in these anti-abortion arguments. See, the really hardcore people will tell you life begins at fertilization. Fertilization when the sperm fertilizes the egg, which is usually a few moments after the man says, gee, honey, I was going to pull out, but the phone rang and it startled me. But even after the egg is fertilized, it's still 6 or 7 days before it reaches the uterus and pregnancy begins. And not every egg makes it that far. 80% of a woman's fertilized eggs are rinsed and flushed out of her body once a month during those delightful few days she has. They wind up on sanitary napkins, and yet they are fertilized eggs. So basically what these anti-abortion people are telling us is that any woman who's had more than 1 period is a serial killer. Consistency. Hey, if they really want to get serious, what about all the sperm that are wasted when the state executes a condemned man and one of these pro-life guys who's watching in his pants, huh? Here's a guy standing over there with his jockey shorts full of little Vinnies and Debbies, and nobody's saying a word to the guy. Not every ejaculation deserves a name. Now, speaking of consistency, Catholics, which I was until I reached the age of reason, Catholics and other Christians are against abortions, and they're against homosexuals. Well, who has less abortions than homosexuals? Leave these f***ing people alone, for Christ's sakes. Here is an entire class of people guaranteed never to have an abortion. And the Catholics and Christians are just tossing them aside. You'd think they'd make natural allies. Go look for consistency in religion. And speaking to my friends, the Catholics, when John Cardinal O'Connor of New York and some of these other cardinals and bishops have experienced their first pregnancies and their first labor pains and they've raised a couple of children on minimum wage, then I'll be glad to hear what they have to say about abortion. I'm sure it'll be interesting. Enlightening, too. But in the meantime, what they ought to be doing is telling these priests who took a vow of chastity to keep their hands off the altar boys. Keep your hands to yourself, Father. You know? So you know what I tell these anti-abortion people? I say, hey, If you think a fetus is more important than a woman, try getting a fetus to wash the shit stains out of your underwear. For no pay and no pension. I tell them, think of an abortion as term limits. That's all it is. Biological term limits. But you know, the longer you listen to this abortion debate, the more you hear this phrase, sanctity of life. You've heard that. Sanctity of life. You believe in it? Personally, I think it's a bunch of shit. Well, I mean, life is sacred? Who said so? God? Hey, if you read history, you realize that God is one of the leading causes of death. Has been for thousands of years. Hindus, Muslims, Jews, Christians, all taking turns killing each other because God told them it was a good idea. The sword of God, the blood of the Lamb, vengeance is mine. Millions of dead motherfuckers. Millions of dead motherfuckers, all because they gave the wrong answer to the God question. You believe in God? No. Dead. You believe in God? Yes. You believe in my God? No. Dead. My God has a bigger dick than your God. Thousands of years, and all the best wars, too. The bloodiest, most brutal wars fought, all based on religious hatred, which is fine with me. Hey, anytime a bunch of holy people want to kill each other, I'm a happy guy. But don't be giving me all this shit about the sanctity of life. I mean, even if there were such a thing, I don't think it's something you can blame on God. No, you know where the sanctity of life came from? We made it up. You know why? Because we're alive. Self-interest. Living people have a strong interest in promoting the idea that somehow life is sacred. You don't see Abbott and Costello running around talking about this shit, do you? We're not hearing a whole lot from Mussolini on the subject. What's the latest from JFK? Not a goddamn thing. Because JFK, Mussolini, and Abbott and Costello are f***ing dead. They're f***ing dead. And dead people give less than a shit about the sanctity of life. Only living people care about it, so the whole thing grows out of a completely biased point of view. It's a self-serving, man-made bullshit story.
Yeah, pretty much is, isn't it? Carlin covered a lot of ground there in 8.5 minutes.
He certainly did.
Yeah, and I think we need to cover ground too, and let's talk about what happened in Louisiana, where the Democratic governor, let me repeat that for the people in the back that can't hear me very well, the Democratic governor of Louisiana on Thursday signed a fetal heartbeat bill into law which bans abortion at 8 weeks. This is what happens when you vote blue no matter who. Period. End of story. And I'll just say it. I'll say it right now. If you're one of these vote blue no matter who people, then you just need to sit out the primary, let the adults in the room vote for you. We'll get it right. Now, is there any debate to that, Jack?
No, the vote blue no matter who is really reversed. It should say to vote blue, there's just a few. Mm-hmm. Because, and seriously, I just thought of that. That's a bumper sticker, in my opinion. To vote blue, there's only a few, and we know who they are, right? Yeah. Bernie and just a handful of people.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
AOC. But the thing is, Darren, they believe that Trump is so bad, any blue will work, and that once that blue's in, like this Louisiana guy, whatever Munchin or any of these idiots do, it's better than having a Trumpster fire.
Actually, I want to clarify something here. I've got this. This is by Melinda DeSlade at the Associated Press out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Louisiana's Democratic governor signed a ban on abortion as early as 6 weeks of pregnancy, a move that has provoked anger from members of his own party. So I apologize. I thought it was 8 weeks. It's actually 6. Governor John Bel Edwards signed the measure Thursday, making Louisiana the 5th state to enact such a law, joining Mississippi, Kentucky, Ohio, and Georgia. Alabama's gone further, outlawing virtually all abortions. The new law will outlaw abortion when a fetal heartbeat is detected, which can come before a woman knows she's pregnant. The law doesn't contain exceptions for pregnancy from rape or incest. Louisiana's law won't limit the state's 3 abortion clinics anytime soon. It takes effect only if Mississippi's law is upheld by a federal appeals court. Edwards did not hold a public bill signing, instead announcing his action through his office. So this guy's gutless because he didn't even have a public signing of the bill, like The perfect example this week, Governor Gretchen Whitmer, when she signed auto insurance reform, did so publicly. So why is John Bel Edwards not signing this in public? He took a public stance. What's the problem? Are you ashamed of what you've done, John Bel Edwards? That's the only explanation I can really come up with, Jack. I just don't know. I mean, it's insane. But yeah, we keep saying it. We say it every week on the show. You're not getting rid of abortion. You're getting rid of safe abortions. Because women are still going to have abortions. They're either going to have to travel or you'll see co-hangers again. I guarantee it. Jack, go ahead.
I think that the last show, we got into depth about the abortion issue, but what this tributary leads to is the refusal of the Democrats to stand for the long established progressive issue of abortion. Mm-hmm. Whether it's this guy in Louisiana or it's Biden, who back when he was younger, going against Roe versus Wade, there's a long history of Democrats who stick their fingers in the rights of women for an abortion. This guy typifies it.
Exactly.
And this is a guy that is, as you said, disguising his legislation and not taking a step up and defending it. There's protests going on in Louisiana today. There's protests going on across the nation. Is it enough? How can it be enough? Once this legislation goes through, you can't get an abortion in Missouri. You can't get an abortion in Louisiana. That's the bottom line. Mm-hmm. Not a legal one, not a safe one. And the people are down there, the women are down there with their hats on protesting. Too bad. You're closing the door, the horse is long gone. And we said just 7 days ago, right, that if you don't start fighting, you're going to lose the right for an abortion. And how much has happened in 7 days?
And I'll go a step further. I'll go one step further, and I'll mention something that my mom has predicted. My 81-year-old mother has predicted that the day is going to come, and it's probably going to be sooner than later, that women are going to start getting violent toward men when it comes to their rights, including abortion. Maybe it's time. Just throwing it out there. Maybe it's time. Maybe it's time to take a page out of the Yellow Vest protest in France.
But Darren, you have a tremendous point there. But I have said for years, we got to be close to when we get violent. Mm-hmm. We've got to get close when we see what Trump has been pulling. We've got to see that the cuts to the rich in the form of tax breaks is going to bring about some violence. Where's it at? Where the blank is it at? Where is there any response? Hell, violence would be ideal, but we're not seeing any response.
No, we're not seeing a thing. And you know what? I'll say it right here. It's because, as George Carlin has said, the owners of this country don't want that because they want to keep you busy. That's why you have to work 2 or 3 jobs to pay the bills. One of our listeners, I'll mention this real quick. One of our listeners, I'm sure he won't mind telling you this story, has an apartment. He lives right over by a Medical Mile, apparently. He has an apartment. He lives in the lower half of the house, and in the upper half, the current tenants have moved out. They were offered that they could stay in that upper portion of the house for an additional $35 a month. Since they've moved out, the landlord has upped the rent in the upstairs by $300 a month. It's now over $1,200 to rent the upstairs half of a house on Medical Mile in Grand Rapids, Michigan. $1,200. Now just think about that for a minute, folks. Can you afford that on what you earn with 1 job, with 2 jobs, with 3 jobs? I don't know if that includes utilities. I know that the laundry is coin operated there. Does that also include being able to pay your utilities, buy food, put gas in your car, pay for the insurance on your car? My guess is it probably wouldn't cover it. Not even with 2 or 3 jobs. Maybe you and your significant other both working 2 jobs, 3 jobs. See, this is what the wealthy in this country want. They want serfdom. They want to go back to the medieval ages. And, the thing of it is,